How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you for joining me here. I appreciate taking the time to talk to me and talk to all the followers that are watching here or will watch in the future. So I truly appreciate it. Wanted to start a little bit by telling people what exactly I'm doing. I have a big following here on Instagram, and I've been thinking of different ways that I can give back to my community. And the way that I've decided to do is to throughout the week, I do local videos with local business owners here. I do live videos with local business owners here, in which we showcase their business, their products, their services, and a little bit of how they are coping with COVID-19. Right, it's a way of local businesses to attempt to get them to get more business and more clients into the doors in a time that we are all kind of are struggling a little bit with business. So. And then on the weekends, what I try to do is have a treat for my followers and people that have watched me throughout the week. In the past, I had Leon Sarsi come in here and talk to me. I had Jay Allen and Louis Bryce, two country singers, in the past 2 Saturdays. And then today, obviously, I have the pleasure of speaking with you. And it's great that I'll be able to combine two things here, right? Not only you are a small local business, perhaps not here in Southwest Florida, but in Florida nonetheless, and you're probably are feeling the effects of this as well. But at the same time, also combining with football, which is my passion, and it's truly what I'm involved in. Quite honestly, a lot of my followers are with football too. So very excited about this one. Very excited to talk to you. I even wear a special shirt for you because I know you like the U as well. So, and I wanted to start by having you introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us, a little bit of your background, where you're from, where'd you go to school, when did you get involved with football, a little bit about Dan Lundy, as a lot of people know your name, know what you do, but don't have maybe that much background information on you.
Yeah, I was initially a soccer player. It's a passion of mine. It's ironic that you're a Brazilian that's a lover of American football first, and I would be honest that the only thing that got me into Fourth Down University and kicking and punting and snapping is soccer, the game of football, as you would say.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm from Daytona Beach, Florida. Grew up playing soccer and American football, and obviously in this country especially, I think that the transition from high school to college in terms of scholarships is going to be American football. There's a lot more opportunity. There's obviously a lot more support financially from the institutions. So I found that I was D2 at best as far as money related for American soccer. And then in football, I was fortunate enough to have some very, very nice options, in the Pac-10. It now is a Pac-12, but I had a number of offers out west. And, all the service academies like West Point and Citadel offered me. And that was an honor. I actually took my officials to 2 of them. But I ultimately wanted to stay home. Like I'm a family guy. Like to this day I have 2 daughters, and I like being around family. So the decision to stay in Florida and ultimately Miami was made pretty quickly after I took all the visits. So that I got hurt, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit today because it also is a big part of my curriculum is the monitoring and pacing of each individual and to make sure that you're not overdoing it because there is such a thing. My message is definitely be the hardest worker in the room, but you must also be the smartest because we're not sustainable. We can't treat everyone the same. We're very uniquely built, each and every one of us. We can use guys as references, but we'll get into that. So I got hurt early, and a guy I'd rather not mention by name, but I'm forever thankful for. He's a competitor of mine, and we're just going to be facts. He almost persisted because he was one of our trainers that would come in once a week at the U, and he was a specialist for specialists. He was very unique at that time. There's a number of us now in the nation that are doing this, I think, at a very high level, but he had an eye not only for what I did on the field, but obviously I guess what I could offer off the field. And it took a year or two to convince me, but I worked with this gentleman for a number of years, and I learned a lot in the process. And that being said, around 2017, 2018, I realized that I wanted to do something personal. I wanted to add my personal touch to this industry, and that's where I am now.
Awesome. So then, 2017, you decided to open fourth down. Obviously you mentioned that you wanted to add your personal touch to it. What was in your mind that you wanted to do differently? How did you want to differentiate yourself? Was it working closer with the players? Was it, understanding? You mentioned understanding the body of each player and all of that. What was the driving force behind you kind of wanting to do your own thing?
That's a great question, and I think it's pretty simple. I was fortunate in my previous company to work with some elite talent. I'm talking I think it's up to 16 now in that span of time. So almost one a year we were producing on a starting roster. So with that being said, the appeal over time increased exponentially. So I was able to see kids from pockets of the U.S. that I couldn't even imagine. Some international, Barcelona, obviously Cairo Santos and Sao Paulo. I was able to see that the valuation of these athletes and how much they relied on the opinion of someone who threw out a star or ranking was absurd. And honestly, it was just it become a business. It become the frequency in which you attend these events is directly related to how high of a 5-star you are. And I was seeing a number of 4.5 superstars, in my opinion. They were getting passed up in a process that I thought became, more and more just not pretty. It still to this day isn't very pretty, and that's why I don't have a lot of fans in my community, because I counter a lot of these beliefs that it's not as cookie cutter as you think. These kids can be valued on a scale that's not just 1 through 5, and I do that through my curriculum. And I'm going to mention that a billion times probably, but I'll elaborate a little bit. But obviously, with the time constraints, I can refer them later to some things that they can see the curriculum, see the content.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I mean, and I think even, even if you take it to a broader conversation, I mean, not just talking about specialists, but, the whole concept of, ranking people, it's very subjective, right? Because you rank, even, obviously you can tell who has talent, who doesn't have talent. But as we know from stories like Tom Brady, or someone that gets drafted, doesn't mean that gets drafted at the 7th round. It doesn't mean that he's not going to have success. It's a lot of, because you're dealing with people, right? So a lot of it is the heart, the background, all of that, and it's very hard to measure all that, from one skill set, right? Because people will have very different skill sets that will ultimately make them successful or not, right? So I totally agree with your point of how it can be subjective trying to rank people, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think there's value in exposure. I will say that I don't want to discount this industry, because I think it's here for a reason. I mean, it's here to establish, obviously, who maybe the best few are. I think they usually find those individuals, but like you said, you can't measure immeasurables, and immeasurables sometimes are way more important when it counts. When a decision has to be made in a split second to win a football game, it's oftentimes on the immeasurables.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because we did a CFL combine in Brazil in March, and I was with one of the head scouts of the CFL, and one of the things that he brought it up was that he was very excited because what he saw in Brazil was a lot of passion, right? And he said, "I'd rather have people that perhaps are a little rough, with their skills, but have the passion for and the willing to learn, because I can teach them, right, how to play correctly. I cannot teach passion. Passion is something you either have it or you don't have it. So when you come here and you see people, even with the conditions that they have, working hard and doing their best and all that, that if you take them to an element where they'll have all the support, they tend to be successful, as opposed to a super big guy who doesn't have the will to learn, or doesn't have the desire to learn. Then it's a lot harder. So it goes back to what we're talking about. How much can you measure the heart of someone, right? It's hard, right?
You might have to fact check me, but I believe there's more 3 stars than 4 and 5 stars in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
And we just have to remind ourselves of these kind of stats. I'm not big into numbers, but some of them stand out. You can't argue that. And I see so many 5 stars that don't ever transition even to the freshman year as a starter, and I would think that would be a bona fide starter. So maybe I need to be more well versed in what it is to be a 5-star on a 4 because I don't spend a lot of time in it, you know.
Yeah. So, what I wanted to ask you was, can you tell us a little bit what kind of, I guess we call them services, what kind of training do you do at Fort Down University, and what kind of players, obviously it's Fort Down, it's for kickers, punters, special teamers in general, but can you kind of walk us through a little bit of, the steps that you do in coaching people in those positions?
Yeah, we do a variety of things. I think the backbone of my program and just where I've been in the past at previous companies that I think works is we have a year-round training program, and we have a few locations. We're headquartered here in Daytona Beach. The Daytona location, for example, will meet as a group twice a month, and our athletes will, in that 6 to 8 hours a month, will compete a little bit. Obviously, you're going to be grouped with your peers within 2 years of you. And it's a lot of training alongside peers. Showing why Billy per se is the best at this particular technique, and the result is why. So we're learning, we're competing at these, and then supplementary training to that is I do. Now it's on Zoom. It's been on other platforms in the past, but we do virtual training. It's a bit hard to do virtual training just yet because I like to have been with my client first. I'd like because a lot of what we do is physical, and it's like you're not linear because your glutes exposed. We got to get back here because what we're preaching is less is better and more repeatable, which you have to be as a specialist. So in addition to virtual training, which is done usually with kids that are more experienced or have a background with what it is I teach, we do. Sometimes we'll meet in the summers for like a week long, and we'll do like a 5-day deal with a demographic, whether it's college transitioning to pro, or high school transition to college, or current college. And I've also, it's just something that's brand new to, especially to Fourth Down U, is I've incorporated the returning component.
Okay.
It's brand new, but like yesterday, for example, we had Florida State Seminoles' newest kid, Nico Dotson, and the Eagles, Adrian Killens. These guys are flying around 4.3, 4.4 speed, and we trying to incorporate them with us. So I'll just give you a quick example. We had like a 30-yard gauntlet where I had my punter. This was at the end of the workout, so he's done. I just had him hit him like a sky ball and serve the returner, but then I had my long snapper cover the space to try to manipulate the space, even though he's going against a superior athlete with no one assisting him. It makes the drill very hard and a lot easier in a game, So we're trying to think of new ways, and it's something I want to do to stand out, is because they're a part of it too.
Awesome. And I know I obviously follow you, on Facebook, on Instagram, and I know you've worked with a lot of NFL kickers. You mentioned Cairo Santos, and I also see that these guys from time to time will come back to you, even during season, if there's like a bye week or something, and kind of try to work with you for 1-2 days that they might be over, just to kind of continue to improve. What are they looking for? What are they trying to do? Because you would think that if someone is playing in the NFL, they're informed, they have all the skills necessary to play, but obviously, it's not the only position. You have quarterbacks that go back to their quarterback coaches and work with them. But for kickers or punters that are playing professionally, and they might have a bye week, or they might have some time, why are they coming back to you, and what are you working with them on?
That's an excellent question. I'll give you two in within the last year. We had a kicker. It's situational, to put it simply. And with examples, the kicker had a right hash mid-level tendency where the ball wasn't acting in the way that he's used to kicking. They tried to hit the same ball, obviously. So he was wondering why between 35 and 45 yards this was a tendency of his. And it's a weird example, but I felt very pressured because I'm filming him, and he's spot on. In these 2 days I'm with him, the end of the second day, I looked at game film, not just our film we were currently training with, and I noticed that the holder was set up directly down the hash as opposed to favoring the intended target. So because he was doing that with his knees, his hands were playing off his knees, and the ball seam was actually heading down the hash as well. So sometimes it's as simple as that. It's everyone thinks so in depth on things, and it's out there. Another example is a punter I had. I won't name the punter because he struggled for this 2 or 3 weeks prior, but he had a few left hash issues where the ball would go out earlier than intended. So imagine you're on the left hash, ball's at the midfield. He wants to put the ball, hopefully in the red zone, ideally within 10 and the pylon. And he was putting it out at the 30, getting a net of 20, 30 yards, which is not a good deal in the NFL.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was it was just simply his plant side arm, his left arm, non-dominant arm was coming off a little early in his process. And I think he knew it, and then something he just oversaw. And it's such a minimal thing. It's essentially like, imagine Steph Curry shooting a three without his left guide hand.
Yeah.
He'll probably make it a lot, but he's nearly flawless with it.
Yeah.
So it's those little things, and as big of an honor as it is, it's also the most nerve-wracking thing, knowing this guy's about to take flight, fully intending on returning in 2 days to his NFL franchise with something fixed. It's like, gosh, all right.
Yeah.
I really hope I can help him.
So the ones you coach when they're playing on Sundays, you're glued to the TV and make sure that
I actually don't. I actually try not to.
You
watch.
Try not to.
It's weird. I'll eventually watch, but yeah. I don't really enjoy it live.
Yeah.
Because I've paid for it a few times watching it live, not going my way. So.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question. So you kind of touched upon a little bit in the beginning. So I mentioned to you previously that I was actually a kicker in high school. We're talking about 20 years ago, right? And my experience is it's crazy. So I tried to play soccer for the first 3 years in high school. I was a terrible soccer player, and I was 240 pounds. So I was way too big to be a soccer player. So the last year in high school, someone told me, "Why don't you try for football?" Well, I was only in the U.S. for 5 years. I didn't know much about football. I go into practice, and the first thing they said, "You're going to be a kicker. You're Brazilian. You're going to be a kicker." So they put me in, and I kick a ball. They put me in to kick a ball. I kick the ball, and the ball goes about 5 yards. Right? Doesn't go high. It just kind of goes 5 yards, and they say, "Yeah, you need to improve on this." And there's a big fence right there. You go in there and you kick it for by yourself against the fence. So every day from 2:30 to 7:30 at night, I went against this big fence and I kicked by myself. Right, and my highlight on the practices were on Thursdays, right, when we did special teams, and obviously on the walkthroughs on Fridays too, where we did special teams and we would kick, 10 yards, 20 yards, and push back and everything. I kicked so much against that fence because I wanted to get good that I actually hurt my knee. So what happened was the cartilage on the knee got used up because of the motion going so much, because I spent 5 hours a day kicking the ball. And obviously I got better, and then I ended up kicking 40, 50-yard field goals. But how much is too much training? I mean, can you train too much to a certain extent that you can hurt yourself like I did? Or is that kind of a one-off situation? Does it not, doesn't impact that much? I'm sorry about the whole story, but I wanted to get to the point.
I think that's something I definitely wanted to talk about. I mentioned it earlier that I was hurt. I played soccer my whole life and football, obviously, until I was my second year in college. I tore my adductor warming up for a Boston College game, and I tore it 2 more times after that in the next year, trying to come back too soon with rehabilitation. And I went to the best, Dr. Uribe, who was with the Dolphins at the time, and it was a career-ending thing. I developed tissue there, and the stress was there. And I asked the experts then, and I've done a lot of research since, because it's something that I want to avoid with my athletes at all costs. And they said it's an overutilization of a place that you can't have an aggressive, unnatural motion often, right? So kickoffs is the most aggressive, unnatural motion, I think, almost in sports. I know it sounds weird, but if you listen to the impact of a good kickoff and you hear the exertion of energy out of a body on a good kickoff, it can't be done more than 8 to 10 times unless you want to risk something happening. But I'll say that again, the younger, like anything else we do physically, the younger, they're like rubber bands. they could hit 30 kickoffs probably. I would not recommend trying. Don't go out there and do that, please. But nearing 20, you're going to start to feel this unnatural aggressive motion. And what it's comparable to in American sports is pitching in baseball. You know, if there's such a respect for pitchers and, oh, our ace can only pitch one in 5 days and he can only throw every other, and they have a pitch count. We started thinking like that, especially when I transitioned to fourth down U, where I want the athlete to communicate at all times, because I don't know how you feel. You know, you might have a little bit more sustainable leg than I do for whatever reasons I don't know, but it's important for the athlete to hear and listen to things, especially their body, and know that like there is a point in which I'm going to not only fatigue, but I'm probably going to work on some bad muscle memory and bad habits that I've been working all day to get rid of.
Right.
So you have to shut it down. Now, no one told you that, but if I just seen you kick 5 hours in a row, we would have had a discussion on how to self-monitor and how to pace this out throughout the week to where you feel like you're still getting work without overwork, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I was determined to become a good kicker too, right? So when they stopped me for a week and they said, the trainer told me, you got to stop for a week and not kick. I mean, I was hurting even more, right? Because I wanted to be out there and trying, and I wanted to, continue learning. But it was definitely a lesson that I learned, right? That you can overdo it. I mean, that's essentially what I did, right? I overdid it. So, wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I have, as you know, we talked a little bit about, Brazil and Cairo Santos, and, what was it like working with him? I have a lot of Brazilian followers, and, I'm sure they are interested to know what it was like working with him, or how was he like, and, how do you see him as a kicker?
It was a good story. I'll tell a brief one. Caleb Sturgis is another NFL guy from St. Augustine, who's a year older than Cairo. I had Caleb since 15 years old. Caleb played at Florida Gators. When Caleb was going into the Florida situation, his younger brother played club soccer with a boy named Cairo Santos, who took all the free kicks, and this little guy that couldn't be stopped, who then at his little Catholic school in St. Augustine, because he was Brazilian, they were like, hey, try and kick, hit a 50-yard field goal his first time out there, and he hit it well because he was just naturally so gifted. But long story short, he generated a buzz in St. Augustine community, and he wanted some instruction. He wanted to see if he could pursue this thing. He was very open to staying in the United States with his host family for his senior year and just acquiring the language better, and ultimately he wanted to go to an American university. I think that was the intention from the start. So we linked up, and we hit it off right away. I think he was 16, he was a young kid, so I think he was 16 at the time. And long story short, he had only 4 attempts his senior year. He played at a school that went 1-9. Not a lot of opportunities, so I went about it and helped him get some exposure via several avenues. But a lot of it was self-promotion. A lot of it was what I think still works to this day. It's going out there and sticking the camera on the floor, hitting record, and hitting 6 in a row. Not many kids can do that. A lot of kids can edit out 6 good attempts in the season. But Cairo Santos stood out because we did these things called repeat drills, where he showed you, I don't like to miss. It led to my receiver coach at Miami when I was in college, Curtis Johnson. He was now the head coach at Tulane, and it was just one phone call, and it was, I like the film, and it was full scholarship, and the rest is history. I mean, his junior year, he went 21 for 21. It's the only time it's ever been done in the history of American football at the college level, ever. There was one other gentleman about 20 years ago that did it 20 for 20. Nate Freeze was close at Boston College. I think he was right around there too. But Cairo owns that and probably will forever own that. That's very difficult to do. And a more interesting fact than that was he was, what was he? 7 for 7 outside 40. So he earned those. A third of his attempts were outside 40 yards. Yeah. And I think less than 5 were inside 30 because Tulane was not that potent that year offensively. So anyway, yeah, Cairo is someone that I will forever respect. He's currently out of the NFL. He's been with a few teams. I think he had most of his success with KC, obviously, the Chiefs. I think that why I have so much respect for him is the God-given is he's very unassuming, and I know most Brazilians know this, that He's probably shorter than you. You probably outweigh him. You probably outbench him. You know, like those things weren't important to him. He knew that he could compete with what he was given.
Yeah.
So I never met a more disciplined, technical human being in my life, and I think it exudes in other areas of his life too. He handles his business, academically, everything, professionally. So I have the utmost respect for Carlos Santos.
That's awesome. The other question, the other thing I wanted to ask you, and obviously you could probably relate to this as I did when I played as a kicker too in high school. So, kickers, punters, they don't tend to get a lot of respect, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times they're the ones that, are winning games or, kicking field goals to win games and helping the team. Has that, and obviously I'm talking about this, when I played 20 years ago, has that changed? Has that mentality changed? Or is it sort of, still kickers are not true players because they're smaller guys, they're not out there in the trenches? Has that changed at all in today's NFL or collegiate level?
I think drastically, and I think you could talk about it from two perspectives. Because coaches at the same time kind of thought it was, and you said it in your high school experience. You guys had one day set aside to work on a third of the game.
Yeah.
So, no, I think that both players and coaches have really, really been progressive about the thought of how important yet different we are. Because we are, and just like O linemen are significantly different than D linemen traditionally, and quarterbacks and cornerbacks, they're different humans. They really physically, mentally. And I'm generalizing, but it's true if you play the game that it's funny how the personality almost fits with the position played.
Yeah.
So that being said, it's incredible to see how much it has changed positively. That there's a lot of respect, and there's also an understanding that we're never going to be the same. And I think we are exponentially as specialists different. Like we're a completely separate box.
Yeah.
But we are definitely part of it,
Yeah,
which is nice.
And that's that. Well, I mean, that's good to know. Obviously, it doesn't affect me today. I wish they thought of this way 20 years ago. But I'm happy for everybody else that has to go through that now, right? And if you hear the great coaches, I grew up in Boston, so I happen to be a Patriots fan, and Bill Belichick is obviously someone I look up to, but he's very adamant about special teams, right? And he always talks about the three phases of the game, and special teams is very important. And he talks about situational football. He talks about he's the one signing special teamers that nobody have an idea, any idea about it. And at the end, those are the people that are actually winning the game for him and helping him. So obviously you see to echo a little bit, you see that in certain coaches, but I wasn't that's NFL. I wasn't sure if that's true at collegiate and high school level as well, but I guess it is.
I've been fortunate. Urban Meyer, someone I've worked for, I worked for him for 7 straight years at the end there, starting in Florida, because I have a number of the Florida Gators specialists that are obviously from this area. So the initial part was he kept recruiting my kids. So he obviously formed a relationship with me, and he actually recruited a few guys out of the high school I taught at. So I started doing his kicking camps, and then I moved up with him to Columbus. In June, we do it for 3 days at a time each year to identify talent or to sign a guy, simply put. And I've found that I've been to Nick Saban's once. I haven't worked with him as much, but I've noticed that these guys are meticulous thinkers in all phases. And I won't name names, but I've also been to some lower level programs that are still playing on television that you can tell the emphasis just isn't there. And it's probably because they don't have the resources or the help on the staff. But I have noticed that just like Bill Belichick is, he's definitely a special teamer. I'll with comfort, I can say that guy spends a significant amount of time to try to win that third of the game. I think that's why those guys are all top, because they dot every I and cross every T,
Yeah. The other part I wanted to ask you about is, so obviously, as a kicker or as a punter, I would say as well, one of the important key elements that you have to have is mental toughness, right? Because obviously, you see this on games. If you miss a field goal, you have to have the mental toughness for the next time you're out there, that you don't let the first one affect you. And is that something that you kind of work with your players too? Not only do you work with them, but what do you do to encourage them? If they missed a couple, if they missed one, or we were talking about the ones that come to you during the season. If they had a bad experience or bad week before, how do you get them up, and how do you get them working towards uh, feeling good about themselves, even though they might have missed a couple or had a bad week?
I mean, I think it's like, and I know it's very cliche to say this, but I think that it's more mental than physical. Although physical is a huge part of it, but I think if you don't have your head, you're out of it. You're definitely not going to compete at the highest levels because there's so many envious people on and off the field that want to see you replaced. You've got to be strong, and you're gonna fail, and you're gonna do it publicly, and you're gonna do it in front of more and more people. The more successful you get. So I've learned a lesson. Teaching is learning. I learned from Cairo. I'll give you another experience with Cairo when he went to the draft, or so the combine in Indianapolis. There's only about a dozen. I would say there was 12 that year. Punters and kickers that get to go and they get to compete amongst whoever wants to watch. And Joe Judge, who currently at the time was your Patriots special teams coordinator, sent us his notes on Cairo and said he was the only one that did not react in a negative way whatsoever after his missed field goal. He missed a 45 left. That was the only one he missed. He said that I could not tell post kick if he had made it or missed it, and it looked like he looked the same as if he had made the other 10 or whatever. He had made 9, and he told Bill that right away, and he said that stands out. People look for things like that. That is of the utmost importance. Absolutely.
Great. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about a little bit is in regards to something else that I know that you do, which is the Ricardo Allen camp. And I wanted to see if you could kind of elaborate a little bit more on that and tell us a little bit more on how you're working with
Look at
Ricardo.
that in my shirt. Sorry, I got it on right now.
Nice, very nice.
That was this year's shirt, yeah. So Ricardo Allen football camp. Ricardo went to Mainland High School. That's where I'm an alum. I taught there for 12, coached there for 12. He went to Purdue after Mainland, and then now he's currently with the Falcons. And of all the people I've worked with in the football world, he's one of the Cairo Santos people that I obviously build a different relationship with people like that because I want to spend time with them off the field. I want my family to meet them. It's those type of people you meet professionally too that you want to know personally. Just because of the human being he is and just how he handles, like you said earlier, the mental is important, right? Well, Ricardo is shorter than me. He weighs less than me, always has. But he starts at safety. He plays defense in the NFL. Like, you've got to be somewhere different mentally to do that on a daily basis and be sustainable. That's one of my favorite words because it's important that once you're there, you can maintain. You can find a way to not burn out. And I think he does a brilliant job of doing that. So anyway, I recognize him annually in Daytona Beach. We have a RA37 camp standing for Ricardo Allen 37. We do it in March, usually the very first weekend in March. It's probably going to change this year with all the mishap going on right now. But, yeah, it's a free camp for kids, grades 6 to 12 usually. And the interesting part about it is we do an offense, defense, special teams component. So we service every position. We bring in a high level of individuals, players and coaches, college players and high school coaches and up to help out and give back. We had 400 or 500 kids this year again. That's what we average. It's been phenomenal, and it's for a good cause. The kids leave with a shirt. A lot of good sponsors like Built, Path Water was our they hydrated us this year. Wilson, Wizard Sports. A number of these organizations step up every year and just make sure these kids leave with an experience.
Yeah. No, and that's awesome. You actually
it is free. Sorry, it is free. It's not. There's no cost. I should mention. There is zero cost.
You actually invited me to go this year, and I wanted to go, but that was the weekend I was actually in Brazil with the CFL as well, because I'm not too far. I mean, not too close, but not too far from you two, right? And I think about 8 hours from here, maybe Daytona.
It's a hike. People out of Florida don't know. Yeah, Naples and Daytona Beach are different worlds to some people. But
well,
I think we're 6. It's not
6 hours. Yeah. I know. When I moved from Boston here, I drove down from Boston, and I got to the border between Atlanta and Florida, and I said, okay, fine. I'm in. I'm so excited. I'm in Florida now. But there was still 8 hours from there to get to Naples, so it was not that easy. The other thing I wanted to ask you, so as far as international players, like I mentioned to you before, I have a lot of followers here that are, not only from Brazil but from Europe as well. If they were interested in training with you, or what kind of services can you offer them? Would it be the same things that you're offering to the people here in the U.S.? And how would they go about contacting you and making sure that they could work something out with you to be here at a certain time? Obviously, it will take a little bit more planning because you're not hopping on a plane from a state in the U.S. It takes a little bit longer. It costs a little bit more. But how can they kind of organize with you to come here and train with you?
I think the fourthdownu.com website, fourth down u, 4thdownu.com. It's a good resource. There's a lot to it. Just play around with it, but you can learn about me, about the curriculum. It's got a couple YouTube presentations that I just spoke at recently on kicking and punting in separate YouTube videos. It's also got a few PDFs and 20-page PowerPoint slides on the subjects we've discussed today. There's a lot and I used to keep it a little closer to the chest, but I found that, I'm just going to share this stuff. It's helpful. It's not going to change your world, but it might change the way you start going about things. And then from there, you can obviously contact me in a virtual setting, like I said, with Zoom, or things got slowed down. I was going to do something in a few months with some international focus, but that's probably going to be bounced back. And I know we have opposite seasons, correct, in Brazil, for example. So this winter, I wouldn't be opposed to doing something in Florida because it's beautiful here.
Yeah.
I just don't know where things stand. So, yeah, for the time being, we're going to be proactive about it, and we're going to respect that we might have to do a lot of things like you and I are doing right now. It's a little slower of a process, but it's better than just sitting stagnant,
Yeah, absolutely. In regards to the services that you provide, and I think you touch a little bit upon that. If I'm a high school coach, a high school player, a college player, I can have multiple sessions with you, or I can have one or two sessions. Is that the way that it works? That I can, if I play at Naples High School, for example, and I want to go up to you and spend a weekend with you, I can do that for 2 days, or is it something that it will be recurring that I have to keep coming back, or how does it work?
Good question. Yeah, I've been very unclear about that. So like at the fourthdownu.com site, there's one of the tabs that's called training options, and it's got about 8. I think it's 8 or 9 options where I have private settings where it's me and you. I'll have a small group setting where it's 2 to 5 athletes. And then we have our large group settings, which are typically my year-round individuals. And then we'll have guests. So if that Naples kid happens to want to come on a weekend where I'm having a large setting, he and I would probably do a private on a Saturday, and he would come to my Sunday large group. So, yeah, it does vary by case. But, Naples being as far as it's away, it's a heck of a drive. You might as well fly. I usually do those settings over like a 2-day private lesson. So we get undivided attention for you, get your measurables, because I measure moments, I guess you could say, simply put. I try to find out where your best balls hit, how your best balls hit, and where you're coming from. Like, where's your back heel in the stance? Where do you drive from the right foot? And then I mark your plant, and we find out what the optimal plant depth for you is. So these are things to obviously go back home and see if I can be repeatable with these measurements, because you're going to find you're erratic. You're going to overstride at some point that will understride the next point. For every action has an equal and opposite reaction is the thing my kids leave with knowing. I don't argue science and I don't argue math. And I respect those and I use them. And I try to use them as simply as I can. I didn't go to MIT. I'm not an engineer, but I, for some reason, have been drawn to the thoughts of perpendiculars and parallels and just all these things that make sense now. For whatever I do in the backside will probably result in the front side unless I'm unnatural with it. So yeah, this takes time and it's easier done in person.
Awesome. Two more questions for you. One of them is, with the current situation of COVID-19, obviously I imagine that it has for everybody else. It has, as you mentioned, slowed you down too. Are you still doing trainings? Are you still doing certain things? Obviously, you mentioned that you do a little bit of videos, but If people are interested in doing something right now, could they still work with you at this time?
Yeah, I'm mobile a lot. The kids that are within, the Central Florida area, I should say, North Florida is where I'm closest to, obviously. I'm driving to them. My county in particular, Volusia County, is pretty under the blankets over everything as far as parks and recreation goes. The kids can go to the beach, but I can't train on fields right now. So all of my contracted fields locally are closed. So I've been going to Winter Springs. There's a place in Ponte Vedra I use in the Jacksonville area. So yeah, I'm mobile to an extent. Like I met a kid closer to you over in Hollywood, Florida, just the other side of the state, but way south. He drove up, and we met in Orlando at the field I use over there. So it's feasible right now for sure. And the kids that feel like maybe Naples right now, they feel like that's a bit too far for a lesson. Let's try to get up on a virtual lesson.
Yeah.
Just to get the ball rolling. And what's helpful too, just like any other sport, I'm sure, is I asked as a prerequisite, I asked for them to send me some film ahead of time. So I have some feedback right away when the discussion starts as to things that I target, I would look at as a coach, both negative and positive. Because a lot of these kids want to know, what's this college coach going to think of me? So I do share those types of things too. And one of them being an unpopular decision or unpopular thing to say is looking the part. Some of these kickers are not in the best of shape. They have very good technique and they're well trained. But I'll take a 6'2" kid with 18 abs over a kid that doesn't. It looks like he's 5'6". It looks like he ate a bag of potato chips.
Yeah.
So I have those kind of discussions too because I think they need to hear the truth. A lot of people aren't willing to say it, but I will that. This is a very competitive thing we're doing. And if you want to stand out and be better, you got to fix these areas. You must.
Awesome. Kind of a little bit of a silly question, but so when I played, I actually used to kick with my toes. So I kicked with the toes. Does anybody still do that, or have you seen people that do that? Is it a common thing to do that?
Not common, but there's always one, I say. If you go to a big camp, there's going to be one out there. And I've never met a kid that wasn't decent at it. Because I think it is, if you have that square surface area block shoe
Yeah.
and you learn where to hit it right, it's an effective way of kicking. I don't think it's ever going to find its way in a scholarship, but it was for the longest of times, right? That's how we did it at first, Jack Dempsey and those guys. But yeah, I'll be honest. Yeah, like every kid I meet, I'm just really honest with them. I'm like, you're one of the better kids out here as far as making it. I'll say that, but a lot of people aren't in love with that style anymore. It's just not my choice.
It's very hard to put direction in it, right? So if you're kicking straight, it tends to be very easy and you're very accurate. But the moment they move you to the hash a little bit, you have to angle yourself to get it straight. Otherwise, you're not moving. It's hard to angle the ball, right? And then the other question I had in regards to drop kicks. Obviously that's something very rare too. And I think the last one I've seen was Doug Flutie that did it when he was with the Patriots. Does that happen often? Do people do that, or?
It's definitely the thing that comes up post training when the kids want to show like a skill they have that maybe no one else has, and it's not easy. And mad respect, I will never forget because I was still actively playing it. I was kicking, and I saw Doug Flutie just out of the blue. I was like, did he just hit that well? I mean, you could tell he had worked at that. He had done that. He had done that for quite some time. It's hard. It's not easy. But if it's hit at the right time, the point of impact has to be when the ball touches the ground, not like any before or after.
Yeah.
It's almost like kicking a ball off the ground, but you're moving generally. They're usually running to it, which makes it difficult. But it's a skill. It's harder than any skill I have to teach with a field goal or a punt, or a snap. I would say drop kicking is something I would never encourage anyone to do.
It's nice to see, but I don't want to see you doing it. Right?
Yeah, it's fun. I really enjoy it. A lot of respect for people that can do it.
Yeah. Now, I know I said those would be the two last questions, but, I love this topic and I love talking about it. So I have another one for you.
Go ahead.
In regards to punters, so we talked a lot about kickers and obviously maybe because I relate more to it. When we talk about punting, there's always a discussion. And, when I see punting done outside of the U.S., here in the U.S., normally punt as high as possible, right? So it gives time for people to run and try to get to the returner. A lot of the videos that I see of people outside of the U.S., they're straight punts, right? So they're not necessarily going up, and they're straight punts. And the idea is, if I kick and I get a touchback, that's good too, right? Because the running game perhaps is not as strong. Um, do you try to differentiate depending on what the team, the player is playing for a particular team, or what the team is asking when training punters? I understand what the ideal of punters is. You always try to place the ball before the end zone, and you try to, I know what the goals is, but are there ever situations where that might not be the ideal goal?
Well, I think I know what you're asking. Like the Australians especially have brought in something I think is great with the up and down rotating ball, or the knuckle ball, or what I like most, which is you can kind of relate to in soccer and your football and Brazilian football, as where the goalkeeper will redirect. He'll be on one side of the 18 and he'll see, maybe a guy streaking down the other sideline opposite of him.
Right.
So he'll switch the field. What I've noticed that punting has become is you almost need to have a bag of tricks, or a couple clubs in the bag, like a golf reference. They're wanting you to have the traditional American punt, that pretty spiral that you can hit in a direction that's a nice straight line. But they're also finding that the unknown is equally or more dangerous. And is he going to hit that pretty ball to me? Is he going to hit a knuckleball short? Is he going to switch the field with with the up and down rotating ball? I hate it because I like to teach. I'm a very structured person, and I coach in a very methodical way. And I think that one thing leads to another. And when these kids come to me and they need to learn how to roll out and switch the field, I've got to constantly remind myself that a part of this technique is the unknown. We don't really want to know how this ball looks, because we don't want them to know how this ball looks.
Yeah.
So it's been a big challenge with me. I think punting is definitely progressing to try to also, what they're trying to do is keep the ball out of the best athlete in the field's hands.
Yeah.
Punt returners in the NFL are usually freaks.
Yeah.
And if they get a phone booth, they will burn you. So that's a good question. I think I answered what you asked.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's wild. Like there's so many punts now. There's a banana punt. You should look it up. Johnny Hecker's, I think, the best at it. But you don't hold the ball in a flat position. You hold the ball down and then in, and then you strike up through it like you would normally.
Yeah.
And it creates a knuckle slash up and down. It's wild, and
Yeah.
it almost bends out of bounds, so it tricks the returner.
Yeah.
It looks like it's coming at them, and then it doesn't. It's wild.
So I promise my last question now. Have you ever met someone kind of like Ray Finkel that missed the important field goal and then kind of disappear in the world and try to hide from the world, or that's just a movie thing?
Man, no, I have a number of those. I'll say right now, I missed a game winner my sophomore year in high school, and that's something that I'll never forget. It's something that I think that you have to experience early if you can, because I know a few kids that just found nothing but success going into college, and then it happened to them for the first time. Like I said, as you get older, you play in front of a bigger audience where you're going to mess up publicly.
Right.
And some kids, have never. I've known kids that have never recovered from one play.
Yeah.
And that's why I said it's definitely, you can't argue that mental is a huge part of this. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the funny thing on that movie, Ray Finkel lived here in Collier County where I live. So I haven't found him yet.
I really want. I was gonna check that movie out the other night. I was by myself, just couldn't sleep. It was a little late at night, and I was gonna put that on. But I was like, I think I'm going to laugh too hard. I think I don't want to wake up even more.
The funny thing is, if you go on Amazon, they actually have Finkel shirts for sale too. And I consider buying one of those. They have Ray Finkel and Bob Boucher, both of them they have for sale. And I'm like, I might consider the Finkel one, laces out.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would be. So they should have made that, because I think that everyone knows that phrase that's our age. I think that was a very popular part of a movie. And then me being a kicker, of course, I heard about it a billion times. Yes, I've seen that movie.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of close out. We've been talking for a little bit, and I wanted to allow you to not only invite people to come in and train with you, but also give your information again on how they can contact you, website. You're obviously on Instagram, Facebook, all the contact information, and so that we can close the video here.
Yeah, fourthdownu.com is the best reference because it has all these things. But I'm on YouTube under Fourth Down University. It's got a number of I try to keep it short clips, and I'll be honest, I'm not that active on my YouTube lately. I've been busy, but the most two recent posts are super important, and they're also, like I said, linked on fourthdownu.com, where I spoke at Nike and Glazer clinics this year, and it's on subjects that we just talked about, like kind of like the fundamentals of my beliefs on both kicking and punting. My snapping lecture will be out soon. I got to get a guy to edit it for me. It's a little too long. But yeah, we in addition to that, Instagram I'm very active on, obviously, right here with you. My personal account is Dan J Lundy, and obviously my Fourth Down U is Fourth Down U. Both connect to each other. Facebook, I'm active for the families of I keep in touch with my family on Facebook a lot, so I'm just under Dan Lundy on that, Lundy. And if you Google me, I've got a number of things that I just like this. I like to share. I like to get involved with people like you that are forward-thinking people, and I really appreciate your time, today for letting me do this.
No, this is awesome, and I keep saying this, and we've talked, I think for now 2 or 3 years about me going up to Daytona Beach, and I promise it's going to happen sooner than later. And I wanna try out a couple kicks and see what you think. If I still got the leg to go, I definitely don't have the body I had in high school, but see, maybe I still got the leg.
Technique, baby. That's all you need, right?
That's all. All right, then. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it again. And I'll be posting also this video on Facebook tomorrow. So if you haven't had a chance to check out here, be sure to watch on my Facebook page.